Let's continue with market failures. When markets are left to themselves, another problem may arise. Monopolies may develop. Monopolies are bad. Monopolies maximize profits for their shareholders by supplying less products or services than is socially optimal, selling them at higher prices. Antitrust laws and regulation created by the state are necessary to prevent monopolies from forming. A third type of market failure are imperfections or asymmetries of information, namely, where someone knows something relevant to the market trade that someone else doesn't know, or where risk markets or other markets are absent. When, for example, one can't buy insurance against many of the most important risks that one faces, such as health insurance or unemployment insurance, it's the government's role to intervene in the economy and create the missing market. Another major reason for the individuals to create a state is the existence of externalities. This is our fourth type of market failure. Externality refers to the situation in which the activity of one person or firm directly affects the welfare of another in a way that is not reflected in the market price. That is, the person affected does not pay the person taking the action, nor does she get paid by him. The person taking the action does not intend to affect the welfare of the other person. It just happens as a byproduct of his action. Transaction costs prevent the parties from bargaining and setting a price for the action or inaction. When it increases the welfare of the affected person, it is called positive externality. When it reduces the welfare of the affected person, it is called negative externality. Pollution is a classic example of negative externality. The polluter does not necessarily wish to pollute. The pollution is a byproduct of the activity. He may suffer from the pollution himself, but he is also the one to gain from his activity, and it is plausible to assume that the benefit to him exceeds the cost, including the cost of pollution from which he personally suffers. Otherwise, he would not have taken the action. Others who suffer from the pollution do not share in the gain. The polluter does not compensate them for the harm caused to them by the pollution. Hence, in deciding whether to take the action and what cost to incur to minimize its pollution, for example, invest in filters, the polluter does not take into account the cost incurred by others. It is the government's role to make sure the polluter internalizes the cost incurred by others. If, for example, the government imposes a tax on the polluter, reflecting the pollution costs incurred by everyone, the polluter will act efficiently, socially efficiently. He will conduct the pollution activity only to the extent its benefits to himself exceed its costs to society, including himself, and will have the proper incentives to decrease the pollution by taking cost-effective measures. This type of tax is known as Pigouvian tax, named after a British economist, Arthur Pigou, who was the first to suggest imposing a tax equal to negative externality. If the government can accurately gauge the social cost, the tax could impose the marginal social cost on the individual or firm that are creating the externality, so that the private cost faced by them would equal the social cost. As a result, when they do a cost-benefit analysis to decide whether to take the socially harmful activity or not, they will take into account the cost to society. So that if they decide to take the action, it will be only because its benefits to them, that is, to society, because they are part of society, exceed its social cost. It is easy to imagine lots of negative externalities, not only pollution. For example, congestion that happens when we drive our car, adding to the already busy roads. There are, however, many positive externalities as well. Can you think of any? Okay, let's see what you came up with. Oh, I see we have some very interesting students here. Dr. K from Beverly Hills. He's writing plastic surgery. Well, that's not exactly what I had in mind. Let's try another. Oh, Brad and Angelina are writing. They write adopting African children. Well, that is not a bad example. And it's signed. I think I'll keep this one. Let's try another. Stephanie from Germany. And she's writing the internet. Oh, that's a great example. This is exactly what I had in mind. It takes us to what I wanted to talk about, which is innovation. To the extent the innovator cannot keep to herself the full benefits of her invention, others will gain from copying it and from building additional innovations on top of it. The state provides innovators with incentives to innovate and let them keep some of the gains to themselves by giving them some monopoly power in the form of intellectual property rights, such as patents and copyrights. But these measures are limited and do not allow them, the innovators, to capture the entire benefit. Some of the gains, that is, the ability to use the innovation, spill over to society in a way that is not reflected in market price, that is, without paying the innovator. Another way by which the government encourages innovation and thus enlarges the amount of positive externalities in society is by providing tax subsidies to research and development. A research that was conducted in the area found that with existing intellectual property laws in place, the private rate of return to research and development is about 10%, while the social rate of return is about 50%, meaning that society in general benefits 5 times more than the individual innovator. This is a good reason to provide tax subsidies to R&D activity, don't you think? Let's take another example, which can go in both directions, either positive or negative. Having children. Having children can be a positive externalities in some societies, where there is a low dependency ratio, meaning in aging societies, where there are expected to be relatively few people at working ages to support relatively large number of retirees. On the other hand, having children can be a negative externality in societies that suffer from overpopulation, as was China in the 70s, when it decided to take action as a state in order to eliminate this negative externality and enforced a one-child policy. Taxes are often used as subsidies to incentivize positive externalities. The idea is the same as in the case of negative externalities. The subsidy causes the person considering the action to internalize the benefits imposed by his action on others, and to take them into account in his cost-benefit analysis. The concepts of public goods and externalities are inseparable. Public goods are an extreme measure of a positive externality. A person taking an action that creates positive externality is producing a public good.